Everybody's been saying, these high prices are because supplies are record low. Guess what? They're not.
They were allowed to put a product of USA label on that brisket that was exclusively produced in Brazil. Tremendously deceptive to consumers.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Smokeless podcast. This is Nick Pensis with Stanley's Famous Pit Barbecue in Tyler, Texas. That's in East Texas, y'all, if you don't know. I host this show with the legendary Wayne Miller from Louis Miller Barbecue in Taylor, Texas, and my good buddy, old pal Justin Forton from Pecan Lodge in Dallas. Justin and Wayne are still out, so I'm holding it down here and doing the best I can without the boys, but we'll be back soon with some more great interviews. Guys, the price of beef is back in the news. I'm continuing to make headlines for all the wrong reasons. Just this morning, I saw a headline that the U.S. Department of Agriculture confirmed a case of the flesh-eating New World screwworm in a 3-week-old calf in Zavala County, Texas. This is the first confirmed detection in the U.S. since 1966. We talked about the screwworm and its potential impact on the beef herd, which is already suffering at a 75-year low. That's clearly causing some pricing issues. This is kind of a big deal. We need to watch this closely, see what everyone's doing to try to contain this, and hope for the best. In other headlines, seeing our buddy Russell Rogel in the news out there talking about barbecue and how prices are affecting everything. Seeing a quote and a story here from Russell. This is as bad as it gets. Russell Rogels, who owns 2 barbecue restaurants in Houston, told the Washington Post, quote, "Everybody's at risk these days. You're one bad week from closing." And I guess that is referencing an article in the Washington Post referencing several barbecue joints that have closed this year. He's in another story talking about the rising beef prices, up 13% this year alone, up 48% from March 2021 until March this year. It's pretty insane, you guys. Obviously, this is something that we talked about on many episodes, and how the herd and all the other factors are contributing to making things difficult at barbecue joints and at the grocery store, from closures to just the pressure and the stress. So again, what is it? Is it the imports? Is it packers? Is it the labeling? Is it ranchers not rebuilding the herd? Or is it simply that demand for beef is stronger than ever and barbecue's just caught right in the middle of it? Today, we're going to pull together 2 of the clearest conversations we had on this subject. First, we're going to hear from Bill Bullard from RCAF. He's going to break down why he believes the system itself is broken, from country of origin labeling to imported beef and packer power. Then Lance Zimmerman from Rabobank, which is the largest agricultural lender in the world, is going to give us a very different reality check that beef prices aren't just about supply. Demand is through the roof. Quality is higher than ever, and restaurants are trying to figure out how to serve premium beef without pricing people out. So if you wondered why brisket keeps getting more expensive, why barbecue joints are feeling the squeeze, and why there doesn't seem to be one simple answer, this is the episode for you.
This industry has been in a state of crisis for a long time. The markets have been functionally broke, and there's a lot of work to do. But as a result of the contraction and the attrition in our industry, we've not attracted new entrants because we've gone through years of depressed prices, and many of the young people who would otherwise aspire to get into the ranching industry resist it because they see the unprecedented volatility in the marketplace, a marketplace that for a long time had generated below cost of production pricing for them. So we need to reestablish confidence. So I agree with those recommendations, and especially the mandatory country of origin labeling. We believe the lack of origin information for consumers is in fact a principal means by which the meat packers can actually exercise the inherent market power that they possess because of their high concentration. In other words, their ability to source beef from anywhere around the world and pass it off to unsuspecting consumers as if it were produced right here in the United States under the highest production and safety standards in the world. We believe that that has had a tremendous impact in depressing domestic cattle prices and forcing those producers out of business.
So,
That's a
Bill,
long
does
answer to your pointed questions.
a bunch of follow-ups, but just immediately to that point, does the voluntary labeling regulation that went into effect January 1, does that at all counter or satisfy the McCool labeling?
Well, it does not. And here's why. What that does is correct a deceptive practice that has been going on in this industry since Congress repealed mandatory country of origin labeling in late 2015. Since then, the packers have been able to import an exclusively foreign product. Let's say a brisket from Brazil. They could import that brisket from Brazil, bring it into the U.S., and as it crosses U.S. Customs and Border Protection, it will bear a label, product of Brazil. But if the meat packer then imports that product, brings it through their processing plant, removes it from the original package, and replaces it with a new package, they were allowed to put a product of USA label on that brisket that was exclusively produced in Brazil. Tremendously deceptive to consumers. That's what this new voluntary rule corrects. It no longer allows a product to bear a product of USA label unless that product was derived from an animal that was born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the United States. And so for those packers who want to voluntarily label, this is a good correction to the years worth of problems that have been associated with it. But unfortunately, it is voluntary. It doesn't require anyone to label anything, and it doesn't require or even address how do you label the imported product. And therefore, mandatory country of origin labeling is absolutely essential. We will likely see product of the USA labels under the voluntary regime coming out of small to mid-sized meat packers. We're not likely to see it coming out of the global meat packers who have found it so advantageous to import this undifferentiated foreign beef and pass it off as if it were a domestic product. And then to add additional complexity to this, all meat in the United States, whether foreign or domestic, will bear a USDA inspection sticker. So every meat product will have a U.S. shield on it, and leading consumers to believe it must be a domestic product, which is simply not the case at all, because that shield does not denote origin. It merely denotes that it has passed inspection through our USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service.
So do you think the problem is because of the imported beef? Is that the crux of it? And when the packers import that beef, are they importing it at a lower cost than what they could purchase domestic beef for?
Definitely. So this imported beef is brought into the United States cheaper than what our domestic production costs are here. And the meat packers have been increasing the volume of imports coming into the United States. And so they have been displacing not just our domestic production, but our opportunities to expand our production. And as our cattle herd has been going through these cycles throughout history, since the early 80s, we've seen that liquidation phase has about doubled in each of the last several cycles, meaning our industry has been stair-stepping downward in terms of the inventory size of our cattle herd. And so as these imports have satisfied domestic consumption of beef and demand, they have eliminated opportunities for our domestic industry to rebuild the herd. And this is a national security issue because we have been quickly replacing our domestic production capacity with imported product, leaving us vulnerable and dependent on foreign countries for the most important beef or protein staple in the United States from our perspective, and that, of course, is beef.
You talked about the traditional market cycles. If you look at the oil industry, if oil prices are increasing, the oil companies are going to increase their pumping and production and drilling and try to take advantage of those price increases. And you said typically that U.S. cattle ranchers would do the same thing. So I'm trying to understand why are they not doing that?
Why isn't that happening? Okay.
Two points. So one, why, if prices are at a historical high, why are we not rebuilding the herd? Why are they not incentivized to do that? And then two, if we're importing this beef at a much lower cost, why isn't that lower cost being passed on to the consumers? Because we're hearing that cattle ranchers are suffering. We're hearing that the big four packers are suffering major losses and closing down production facilities.
Right.
But something doesn't quite add up because we've got all these high prices, and every point in the cycle, people are saying that they're suffering in the supply chain.
Right. So excellent question. And the truth is that we should have been rebuilding our cattle herd beginning at least in early 2023, because at that point we had reached the price point where it was profitable for cattle producers to expand their herd, and we would have expected the herd to expand. So this is quite alarming that now here we are in early 2026, and we still have not begun an expansion phase of the industry. So the question is why? And a big part of that answer is because cattle producers just went through a very similar situation just a little over a decade ago. We had a widespread drought around 2010 to 2013. And our herd, as I've said earlier, had already been liquidating for decades. And so we were already in a liquidation phase when the drought struck. And so in 2014, our herd inventory fell to the lowest in 70 years. And we had incredible beef demand. So both beef prices and cattle prices increased through that period. Cattle prices in 2014, at the end of 2014, hit the then highest nominal levels in history. And the cattle producers made the decision to expand. And so soon after that, they began an expansion phase, but inexplicably, cattle prices collapsed in 2015, and they collapsed further and faster than in any time in history. So those who tried to expand suddenly were faced with severely depressed prices, and many of the aspiring ranchers that got into the industry at that time had to exit. The 2022 census shows that since that time, from 2017 to 2022, we lost 106,000, actually 106.8 thousand cattle producers from our industry, and we lost about 2.5 million mother cows just during that period. So the cattle producers today who are seeing these very positive factors are hesitant to jump in and begin the expansion phase of the industry, knowing full well that they did exactly that beginning around 2015 and 16. And by 2019, they turned around and we started liquidating again. So we're now in a 7-year liquidation phase. Again, that's about twice as long as the normal 3 to 4 year liquidation phase. So history is repeating itself. And that's why we're not seeing the growth. The other question you had is, if we are importing large volumes of cheaper product from around the world, why aren't consumers benefiting from those lower cost imports? And the reason is because we do not have mandatory country of origin labeling. It's because the packers can import that cheaper foreign product, commingle it with domestic product, pass it off to U.S. consumers for the same price as a domestic product, because the consumers do not know the difference. And again, that's why the lack of country of origin labeling provides the means for the meat packers to exercise the actual market power that they possess in this highly concentrated industry.
I understand the deception there, but I don't understand how their margins wouldn't improve. How are they suffering these losses if they're technically selling this beef for more than what they are selling domestic beef for?
Are you talking about the meat packers suffering losses?
Yes.
Yes.
So the meat packers, if you look at right now, we had this most recent economic shock, and that was the drought in around 2022. Brought our supplies to 75-year low. Incredibly strong beef demand. So beef prices had already begun increasing for consumers back in 2017, even while cattle prices were falling. But most recently, this demand supply equation got so distorted that cattle prices broke free of the restraints that they were under, and they chased beef prices upward. And that's why we see these incredibly high beef prices today for consumers and incredibly high cattle prices for cattle producers, which is good. The meat packers are complaining that their margins have shrunk, and indeed they have, from historical highs that they were receiving up until this latest economic shock. But now, as they increase the imports, now they're making a larger portion of their profits off of buying cheaper imported product, but yet selling it for the same price as the beef that they're actually slaughtering and processing here in America. So they are, while they can legitimately claim that their margins on slaughtering domestic cattle have been reduced, what we're seeing is the prospects of much greater profitability because they have significantly increased the volumes of imports coming into this country. Because these same highly concentrated meat packers are also those importing the beef product. And so what we're finding and what history has shown us is in a concentrated market like ours, increasing imports will not decrease the price of the product that the consumers are paying, because the meat packers can exercise their market power and capture more of the profits within the entire beef supply chain from the imports and from the domestic cattle.
We still have a very strong demand for beef, maybe stronger.
Absolutely.
You know, this is something I was trying to get at over the last couple of interviews as well, is what is really driving that increase for or desire for beef consumption?
And now you're hitting at it, Wayne.
Right. I mean, because Is it diet? Is it profitability? Is it health? Is it taste? Is it prestige?
Price is a function of two things: supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's been saying, these high prices are because supplies are record low. Guess what? They're not. Cattle supplies have been drifting lower. The cow herd peaked cyclically in 2019. It's bottomed in here in this 24, 25, 26 period where statistically those numbers really aren't any different. When you look at the errors the government publishes in their cattle inventory reports, it's drifted a little lower, but it's within the statistical error of those all three being the same inventory, essentially. But what really moves prices, and you alluded to this to some extent, is per capita beef supplies. And that's a fancy number that there's a few things that go into it. One, it's domestic production, slaughter times pounds, carcass weight equals production, minus exports. We can't consume in the US what we don't have, plus imports, which usually those two are offsetting. They haven't been recently. Imports have been exceeding exports. And then we divide it by the number of mouths to feed in the United States. What nobody's talking about is that per capita supply number. While we can talk about the mix shifting a little bit, and you rightly identified that, per capita supply has been almost flat since 2019, between 58 and 59 pounds a person. And so if supply is flat and prices are record high, you hit the nail on the head, Wayne. It's demand that's driving the record high prices today. Demand is the highest it's been this past year, 2025, since 1983. But numero uno is we improve marbling. Today, you buy beef as a consumer at the retail store. It's the highest quality beef on average you've ever had in your lifetime. We produce, it's over 6 pounds of prime and choice beef in the US for every 1 pound of select. Back up to 2005, it was 1.5 pounds of prime for 1 pound of select. And one of the problems that we all have when we talk about price is we want to talk about it in isolation. And I want to shake people when they do that, because here's the problem. You and I, none of us darn well, better be making the same amount of money today as we did 10 years ago, right? It's not a good trend. Beef prices have actually, when you convert retail beef prices, not just brisket prices, but retail beef prices to a minutes worked per pound of beef, it's creeping up towards the highs when you look at those metrics, the highs we would have seen both during the pandemic and back in 2014 and 15, but it's not outrageous. And the other part of it is, and this is where your guys' struggle really becomes, how should I put this? A challenge. Retail's whooping restaurants' butts right now in terms of value delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're Joe or Jane consumer, and I'm going to use a steak as an example, you want to buy a nice upper 2/3 choice prime strip steak at a white tablecloth restaurant, your starting point is probably $75 for the steak. You're probably still buying the sides at a really good restaurant. You're certainly still buying the drink, and then you're gonna have a 20% tip if the staff does their job well, right? Maybe more if you're a generous tipper. That same steak costs you $25 at the grocery store and a little bit of time. Then you go buy $10 of sides. You have you a nice low ball with some bourbon over an ice cube in it.
Oh,
You're probably talking a $35 meal at home. $35 versus what's easily $125 total bill per meal at restaurant. Relative value. Retail is kicking restaurants' butt at the steak level. And so what I tell folks in your guys' shoes, quit worrying about price, because we're not selling lead today. We're selling gold when we put it on a plate, and it's justifiable. And the consumer's saying, yeah, dang it, beef is more expensive than that pork butt, which I love a good pork butt done well. I love smoked chicken wings. We do them here at my home. The most underrated protein to cook on the smoker is boneless, skinless thighs. But beef is king, and it's expensive, but the consumer says it's worth it. This isn't a supply issue yet. You guys are hitting on it and alluding on it. The supply issue's yet to come. Right now, it's just record demand.
So, whereas Wayne asks really super smart questions, I'm going to ask the really dumb question here.
No dumb questions, Nick.
But how do you measure demand?
We can count cows.
Mm-hmm.
We can count slaughter. We can count beef production, slaughter times carcass weight. We can even get whittled down to that per capita supply metric I talked to you about. Demand is different because it's not per capita consumption. Per capita consumption is actually a supply metric. Demand is not just price, because all else equal, if supply just drops, price should go up, right? A tighter supply should motivate a price increase. And so what demand actually is it's asking two questions at the same time. It's saying, how much product do I want? And based on that, how much am I willing to pay for it? And so to evaluate demand, when I'm telling you demand bottomed in 1998, it's grown to the highest level we've seen now since 1983. And what we're going to do is, based on how supply changed from that reference year to the next, how should price have moved based on that supply change? And what they'll do is they'll use what we call an elasticity. And if any of you stayed awake in your macroeconomics 101 classes, an elasticity is actually a scientifically measured price response for how prices change based on a change in supply. If the price response disappointed relative to that research that we have, published journal research on elasticities for beef, then it's a demand break, a demand decline. What I'm telling you is, for the last 20 plus years, almost 30 years now, demand has improved. The price response has exceeded what we would normally expect based on past consumer research on beef. And I think part of that is beef's the only protein in the meat case, with maybe the exception of seafood, that has an inherent flavor profile, right? Chicken tastes like what you put on it. Pork, even to some extent, largely tastes like what you put on it. Beef, you could put beef on the smoker, not put a dang thing on it, and it's still going to taste like beef, right? I mean, of course, we want to put seasonings, we want to do some fun rubs, things like that. But at the end of the day, you could put beef on there naked, and a good cut of beef is still going to perform after it comes off the smoker. You certainly can't say that about chicken in most cases. Some pork cuts, you can get away with that. And I think that matters. I think the other part of this that's important for us to realize that's working against your guys' clientele and colleagues, I should say, is we've seen a surge in retail demand for briskets. The pandemic taught everyone how to cook. And if it didn't at least teach them how to cook, they geared up. They now have a pellet smoker, a wood burning stick smoker, a Blackstone, a sous vide machine, an air fryer, an Instapot. And the pandemic taught them how to use it. We can debate how well it taught some consumers how to use it.
Well, I mean, I can correlate that to our menu. We're doing everything we can to provide options that are not brisket, right? Like we serve breakfast. We have items on our breakfast menu that start without brisket. And then below that, we have the extra price with the brisket on, which makes it much more. And that's still what we sell the most of. The items that have brisket, they want it. But inherently, as pitmasters, we're still terrified of hitting a price ceiling. There's a point where we feel like the demand for this stops working. But I mean, are we just in a place where quality is going to trump the price for good, that they're just going to keep wanting it? I mean,
Great question. For now, we're okay. And what's fascinating is I mentioned that beef elasticity.
Yeah.
There was a lot of work done with elasticities across different types of beef, cuts of beef, at the retail level, at the wholesale level, which is where you're shopping to buy your product, even at the ranch level with different types of cattle. So what happened in that 2017 study is it started showing that beef relative to pork and poultry were no longer good substitutes. Pork and poultry were still good substitutes with each other. In other words, if pork got way too expensive relative to chicken, they'd flock to chicken or vice versa. But beef, that cross-price elasticity relationship was breaking down to the point that beef was kind of standing out on its own. That would kind of get at what you were alluding to, Nick, in a real-world sense, being supported by the academic research. The other thing that was fascinating, which brings me to the point of, do we need to be worried about pricing ourselves out of this market, is it showed that as long as consumer incomes stayed steady or increased, they didn't care about the price of beef. When things got tough from a consumer income perspective, that's when you had to start worrying about beef prices. And so that means two things. We need to be much more sensitive to our beef pricing in periods where we hit a recession or an economic slowdown. And we need to be much more sensitive to beef pricing when we know the consumer has a lot of demands on their income. And so to your point, some of those things kind of exist today.
Definitely.
But is it a perfect red herring? Probably not. There's still a segment of the population that's doing well. And so I think it's warranted to be sensitive to some of those challenges that the consumer's facing. But if we start seeing signs that the economy is really rolling again and that some of those concerns aren't necessarily what we thought they were, then we can continue to charge ahead. But I think the biggest thing that I see, even considering that research, is if you're going to have beef on your menu, it darn sure better be good. Like I said, beef's too expensive to settle for select or settle for, some imported product that doesn't deliver on quality attributes. Every study that you look at when you ask beef consumers why they buy beef, taste and value are always at the top of the list. And everything else is secondary or even third string down the list in terms of what they care about most. Even with all this drive for sustainability and all natural and organic, those attributes tend to work their way down to the bottom of the list. They're distant compared to taste and value. And I think that that's where barbecue wins. That's why it's such a popular destination for consumers even today.
Well, y'all, very interesting comments and information from those guests. If you guys want to take a deeper dive, check out the past episodes on the beef prices. We had several more guests and episodes about this subject, and it seems like it's not going to go away anytime soon. The more I search headlines about barbecue in the news, the more I'm seeing about this. Like I said before, guys, this is a huge issue, not only for the barbecue industry, but just in general. As Americans, we like beef. We love beef, especially in Texas. So this is something that we're going to be paying attention to as all of these things develop. This news about the screwworm being detected in Texas this morning is a big deal, and I hope that they contain it. We're going to watch that closely. Guys, thanks for tuning in to Smokeless. Justin and Wayne and I will be back soon with some more great guests. And if you're looking for a new friend in the meantime, I want to give a shout out to our friends at drinkwillies.com. Get your first order 10% off using promo code Smokeless at drinkwillies.com. Go check out all the great stuff that the legendary Willie Nelson is doing and creating some enjoyable alcohol-free tonics and beverages. Check out our friends at drinkwillies.com. Use promo code Smokeless for 10% off your first order. Subscriptions do not apply there, but check it out. Think you'll love what they got going on. We're really enjoying their stuff. As always, on behalf of Justin, Wayne, and myself, thanks for listening to Smokeless. Please like, subscribe, check us out on Instagram, Smokeless_podcast, and we will see you guys soon. Thanks so much.